Hello and welcome to the Lock-In podcast. This is episode 33 and we're back after an extended Christmas break. My name's Conor Moynihan. I work for Blacknight. We're the Irish web hosting company based in Carlow. But I'm not in our Carlow office and neither is the vast majority of our staff. Even though we're an essential service, almost a third of all Irish websites are on our servers. We have been working remotely for most of the past year and no interruption in service. We count ourselves very lucky to be able to do that. We started this podcast last year to talk about how life is changed by the pandemic, and we've covered everything from small business to music, education and the arts. Today, we're going to talk about remote working, and I'm very pleased to present an interview with somebody that I first interviewed on our sister podcast, the Blacknight podcast, about 2 years ago. Way back when remote working was a new and revolutionary idea as opposed to what it is now, and it has become an essential part of how we live now, I think. On that subject, later in the show, I'll tell you about some free remote working resources that my colleague Jonathan Thomas has compiled into a useful PDF guide. This episode was recorded before Christmas, and it's a little different to the other episodes in this series in that I wasn't working here in my home office with lights and a virtual backdrop and that kind of thing. Instead, I'm in a scenario which may be more familiar to a lot of people who find themselves working remotely. We were getting some long overdue renovation work done on our home, and as a result I was banished from the office and I found myself podcasting at the kitchen table. My guest on today's show is someone that we featured on the Blacknight podcast last year. Sean Brady, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Sean works for a company called Cloud Assist, and I was going to say where you're based, Sean, but actually you guys aren't based anywhere because you've cottoned on to this remote working before an awful lot of people. When I met you first, I met you at Congregation, the little event for big ideas that's held every year in Con, County Mayo, and what we talked about there, I remember in particular, was the whole idea, the revolutionary idea of remote working. And you were very much an evangelist for it, and people can go and review the podcast. We'll put the link to it in the notes as well of this show. But you had a lot of very, I suppose, a lot of things to say about why remote working was beneficial. But even then, and I think people would say that now the why is kind of proven. It has obviously had practical benefits for people with the pandemic restrictions, working from home and working remotely. There's an awful lot about, how would you say, the whole issue of rural development and the importance that it can have for that as well, and the fact that people can work where they live. But a lot of the objections, I think, to remote working have kind of been swept away by the fact that it has worked out quite well in many cases. But it's not a golden key, Sean, I think you would say. And even back then when I met you, the podcast was published a year ago, and I think we actually recorded it a year before that. Even then, I recall you weren't so much focused on the why and the benefits of remote working, but you were very much focused on the practicalities and how to make remote working work.
Yeah, I think it's a journey for everybody. So there's no switch, as you say. There's no golden key or silver bullet. So it's a journey of change. But the most important thing that we've seen is the importance of culture. Mm-hmm. People think because we're tech heavy, and we are, right. We are a Microsoft cloud partner. Our job actually is to assist people with Microsoft Teams, which is all obviously aimed at remote working now. But yeah, we've been remote working ourselves since September 2017, so over 3 years. People thought we were mad when we actually implemented a no visit rule. We did that after coming back from a big Microsoft event where they had launched Teams, and it was like a road to Damascus moment for us. And we said, well, if we're going to do this, why would we travel to someone's office to show them how they can use Microsoft Teams to avoid travel? That was one of the benefits of Teams, of course. And then, even then, people thought we were crazy. Microsoft even was questioning our ideas. You never visit clients ever, and we said that's right. It's one of these, I suppose, important things you have to do. You have to lean into it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go half and half. You can't ride two horses at the same time. You definitely want to lean into it and become what we're classified as a remote first. So everything's remote. So we divorced ourselves from our offices. We've now obviously we don't care about where our customers are. All we care about is time zone. So I put it to you that again, the cultural change of doing that is quite obviously difficult for bigger companies. I recognize that. We're a small company of 12 employees. We're based in now 4 countries over 3 continents, right? And again, no offices. And the reason why we moved, obviously extended our people was for time zone. That was the only reason, So we have people in Austin, Texas, in the middle, again, center of the United States so they can cover East and West Coast, and then obviously Australia to cover APAC regions as well. So we don't have to be up at stupid o'clock in the morning delivering our work. So it's fascinating. I just think it's akin to the cottage industry evolution into the Industrial Revolution. For me, this is how profound this is. So
It's interesting, Sean, because 2017 seems like another world, a carefree world, a world without pandemic, a world without social distancing, a world where remote working really was something exotic, okay? So you guys were operating in the region of the exotic, I would say, back then. And I recall making this point to you that we were at congregation with people who were forward thinking and who were tech savvy and all of that. And I recall saying to you, putting it to you that time in Con County Mayo, saying to you, well, you're preaching to the converted in many ways. Many people here are already remote working. Owen Kennedy, the founder of Congregation, works remotely and that. But I said to you, how is this going to play out with business in general and with government and with policymakers and things like that? And you had some very good points to make about that. But none of us, I think, could have imagined that we would be where we are now so quickly. That's what I want to ask you about, Sean.
Yeah.
What has changed for you as someone who is selling remote working technology, evangelizing for remote working and making the case and helping companies to address the practical issues? I imagine there's been a step change since February and March of this year.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to again, pushing the technology. Most of the time, we want to understand the business, what they're doing. What is teamwork? Remember, we tend to not use the term remote working because it has, unfortunately, some negative connotations. I think people associate that with obviously all the COVID madness. So we talk about remote teaming, which is now a newer term, where it's all about teamwork and getting people to connect and work together and collaborate. And that's the difference. Well, we actually don't want people just to be on meetings and meetings and meetings from morning till night. We want them to be actually productive, but also recognize the value of changing not just the office, but also the way we work. Like 9 to 5 does not exist for us.
Yeah.
Right? It's a very important distinction as well. Obviously, we do tend to maintain certain patterns, but we don't obviously, like any other remote first company, we're not obviously there trying to micromanage our people. In fact, the whole idea is that trust. You must trust your people to do your work. And I'll just want to refer to a few books that I'd like to help obviously get some learnings across. There's a great book, and there you go. It's called Remote, and it's from Jason Fried. So it's again a great book to talk about what is remote, right? And what it means to be a remote worker and be part of a remote team, or distributed team is this new term as well. So it is, again, important to recognize that not everyone has the answer. I wouldn't say I'm an expert. And if you ever hear someone say I'm a remote working expert, I question that, because we're all in this new learning space. And remember, we've been at this for 3 years and we're still learning. We're still learning how to improve the way we connect with our customers. Like we do interesting things like sending our customers Starbucks credits so we can have a virtual coffee. We were doing that before COVID, and we're doing it now because obviously we physically haven't met a client for 3 years. Imagine that. And they've never visited us. That it actually takes a lot of psychology.
Yeah.
Right. So I love talking to psychologists and seeing, what's human behavior. And then once we've established what the users are doing, what the dysfunction, remember, we're all about behavior, and then we apply the technology. So we're not a technology first company. We'll then look at how the technology can enable change. And that's a very important distinction. I think if you see people trying to sell you features, that's not the right way. You need to look at your company and how you're going to transform your company first, and then apply the technology to that change. That's again, the future of work as well is coming into play as well, because people obviously before COVID heard about future of work, maybe didn't fully appreciate it. That's here now. The future of work has landed right on our desks in a very short space of time, and the opportunity for increased productivity is there for the taking. Right? It's one of the fascinating things about remote working. It can accelerate how we do things, also strip out the waste, but also look at how we can use AI to improve our productivity. That's what future work is all about. It's called the 80-20 flip. So before obviously you move to remote working, most of your work is routine and repetitive, and I wouldn't say wasteful, but it's not highly productive. But with remote working and using AI, you can actually change a lot of that routine work and automate it or semi-automate it, and then therefore your teams are more productive. So that's my belief in when you're looking at this. Don't always think about the technology. Look at your business. Look at what your business is doing, who's doing what, and then map your technology to that.
You say you're still learning, Sean, and I think part of that must be that you keep encountering new situations where your assistance is called for. And you've been featured recently in an RTE television programme, which was an episode which was broadcast last Friday evening. And you were able to come to the assistance of a university student who was looking for a work placement. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, it was really inspiring just to be involved and just able to help. It was great. But remote working shows a different side to it now. It's not just about COVID. Now we're actually enabling people to who may have never been able to get the job that he or she wants. We can now use remote working to help people with disabilities to access the workplace. Right, the virtual workplace, the digital workplace. So what happened was, it goes back to when, again, before COVID, we were exhibiting at the University of Limerick campus at the career fair for Grow Remote, which again is an incredibly important initiative that's helping companies and people who want to look at remote working and be part of a movement. So if you want to learn about remote working, go to growremote.ie. So I was on the campus, and we had a stand. We had our we were trying to tell students at that, maybe this was before COVID, that you don't have to go to Dublin, Cork, Galway, whatever, any city, Limerick, to get a job now. You can work anywhere and get fantastic jobs with these remote first companies. And this lady came rushing down to me and said, we cannot get a placement for this student. Could you help? And I said, well, if we can, we certainly would try to direct him to something. But what happened was this young man, Sean Fogarty, had an accident in his first year of college where he severed his C1 vertebrae on his spine and now is a paraplegic. After 2 years anyway, of rehabilitation, he's now returned to college and is top of his class in computer science, but he couldn't get a placement in the co-op, which is what happens in the latter half of the third year. And because he's obviously in a wheelchair, he needs 2 helpers. He has oxygen. He has vent here for breathing. He cannot breathe by himself. So no company would take him, and despite being top of his class. So if you can't get a placement, you're not going to get a job. That's, I would say, pretty much a given. So we said we'd take him on. Sean has turned out to be incredible. He embraced remote working better than anyone else I've ever seen, because obviously for the first time he realized now remote working has opened up his world of opportunities. So we also gave him a challenge where we do like our tech, right? We like our bling, and I'm going to share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about, so everyone else can see it as well. This is what's called a virtual presence unit. You might have seen him on TV, on actually comedy programs like Big Bang Theory. This model was featured. This is an iPad on a Segway. So that can be driven around from anywhere in the world. And that's me actually up in Microsoft attending a partner event. You can see everyone smiling. It's an amazing, no one would ignore you when you're on this thing. And it's incredibly productive, because I can, rather than traveling up to Dublin, where I'm based in Limerick, that 2 hours up and 2 hours down is gone out of my, so I can be there. I'm more productive. I'm actually more connected. I can even present from that screen, and and let's be honest, everyone remembers me. It's a bit of bling, and they even put a little name tag on me. Do you see that there? You can see it on the screen.
Yeah.
So anyway, Sean. Sorry, Sean Fogarty. Then, sorry, I'm going to go back. Sean Fogarty only can move his eyes, so he's a paraplegic. He has eye tracking software which looks at his eyes and obviously allows him to move the keys on keyboard and obviously mouse. And we said to him, "Here, try and see if you can drive that." And we rang the manufacturer. In fact, we said, "Could a paraplegic with eye tracking software drive that device?" And they said no. Well, Sean spent a bit of work at it. He has 3 different eye tracking software, and he used obviously different experiments, and he's now been able to use that. So he can now move for the first time since his accident, virtually. Remember, he cannot move his own wheelchair.
Yes.
So this is incredibly liberating for him. So he now has to work from anywhere, and also be if the company wants him to be in an office, he could be in an office. So I just think it's great. I just think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing that remote working has now transformed that young man's life.
I was saying to you earlier before we started, Sean, that I was going to ask you where do we go from here, and I thought you might be the best person to ask, because in relation to predicting the future, it's not a fair question to ask anyone, but I think you already live there to an extent.
Well, I'm a few days ahead of everyone. That's all.
More than most people I know. Yeah.
I mean, okay, we are. We're at the end of 2020. A vaccine has just been licensed in the UK and will be rolled out in Ireland and other parts of the world, hopefully before too long. We've had a scare. We've had a fright. Are we going to eradicate COVID, or at least contain it? These are all big questions, but I think that most people would agree that we've learned a lot, and it's been a transformative experience over the last year. What do you think, Sean? Again, I know it's not a fair question. Where do we go from here?
Well, I suppose I'm a dreamer anyway. My CEO always tries to rein me in. So I like dreaming the future. I do, actually. I think it's a great thing to do anyway. And listen to other people. Listen, get engaged in the conversation. The conversation is there. Be part of it. And, the future is whatever we make it now, because most companies now have realized, why do we have an office? And maybe asking questions of themselves. And guess what? We were actually on this journey even before we moved to the no visit rule. In 2016, we were chosen as a finalist for the Climate Launchpad competition. It's an EU-wide program. Very few people hear about it, but I want people to actually even look at it and see maybe they can contribute to it. So it's the EU Climate Launchpad. It's an ideas program for climate change. It's basically like Eurovision for nerds. So every country in Europe puts forward an idea like a song, and then one is chosen, and that goes off into to this higher competition. And our idea was, this is back in 2016 when I said, why is everyone traveling for business when we have all this connectivity and collaboration platforms? We have better now. We have better connectivity, better collaboration platforms. And we worked out, because we were told that the Climate Launchpad had a boot camp. And I never realized the word boot in boot camp, because they basically stamp all over your ideas and make you rethink what you're trying to present. They said you must present it in business terms, because they put up a picture of a sweating polar bear on a melting ice cap. This is a caricature, obviously a cartoon. And they asked us, what did we see? And we were saying greenhouse gases, melting ice caps. They said, no, polar bears don't have money. You need to put your idea in terms of business. So we worked it out that for every ton of CO2 saved from not traveling, you gain 3 days of productivity. So for every ton of CO2, when you hear this ton of CO2 anymore in the future, any business says, okay, I can convert this travel back into productivity. So that's a great way of looking at the future, that our environment has benefited from COVID.
Here's the thing, though, Sean, is that I recall you telling me this 2 years ago in particular, right?
Yes.
And it absolutely makes sense, and it sounds good in theory. But what I'm saying to you is that businesses have been forced to embrace embrace remote working. They've been forced to embrace no travel, and they have proved. I think now I'm going out on a limb here, but they have proved that whether or not you can measure those 3 days of productivity, at the very least they have proved that they hadn't lost productivity. I saw some survey there recently. 40% of the European workforce is working from home. Productivity is up, and in fact they're working longer hours than they did when they were in the office.
Yeah, and again, I worry when I see that statistic of working longer hours. That's not what the whole idea of remote working you shouldn't be working longer hours. I don't want that to be seen as a kind of a.
Well, maybe they're doing it joyfully, Sean. Maybe they're doing it happily. Maybe they're doing it and saying, I don't have to sit in the car for an hour and a half on the way home.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So for them, it's not the same. It's the same time, but the time is more productive. That's right. It's the time at your desk. And but what I find is with any change, there's resistance. Yeah. Right. And that's the problem. So we have to look at this in step changes, small incremental changes, and it won't happen overnight. And you will make mistakes. We made a bunch of mistakes. You have to obviously work at it objectively and say, well, okay, that didn't work. And we do that all the time. We use kind of a lean principles when we look at what we do. So we look at what works, what's the supporting overhead, and what's the waste, and and also obviously talk to our customers and ask them, did that work for you? What didn't work for you? And we found that we were doing our meetings, our consultations, our engagements, we set them for 2 hours, and it's just too long. Yeah. In fact, now the studies showing that that 2 hour meeting can be it's more stressful than a 2 hour in-person meeting. So we pull that back to 90 minutes. In fact, we try to get most of our engagements are 60 minutes. So you have to learn from talking to your workforce, but also talking to your customers and seeing what works for them. And then looking at the technology, my biggest advice is 2 words: have patience. Patience. Like, for example, this call, I would always be on. I said this actually 2 years ago, and I'll say it again. When you're meant to be on an online meeting, get on 2, 3, 5, 10 minutes before, and do not wait for the minute before you go on. In fact, we prefer to be on 15 minutes beforehand.
Yeah, and you can be working away.
Correct. Absolutely. That's the beauty of it. You can work away, and then when someone joins, now here's the interesting thing. And again, I think I said it before. Most people feel that online meetings distracts from the social connection, right? So you have to work at that, right? And people get straight into the agenda, and there is actually very little space for that, human connection. So we actually try to make space for that in our time with our customer. Now, if you're on 50 minutes beforehand, if anyone jumps on beforehand, that's the moment when you can actually discuss how their kids are doing, how's the weather where they are, what's happening, in their lives, and then connect with them.
It's common, and I think that companies who find themselves suddenly working in this distributed fashion like this are realizing that yes, you got to have the small talk, you got to have the banter. We've made a feature of it in our regular meetings here at Blacknight as well. I say here at Blacknight, I'm working, normally when I'm doing this show, I have a virtual background, green screen behind me, and I show the green fields of Carlow. But I should explain to viewers and listeners that for a change, due to renovations going on under my roof, I've been forced into I think a more common remote working situation, which is I'm here at the kitchen table with the fishies for company there behind me. I'm working with the fishies. Anyway, Sean, it's been wonderful talking to you, and I'm always interested in the fact that I guess a lot of us are living this now, but you're not only living it, but you've made it your business to think about it and to think about how you can help others do it better as well. Thanks very much for joining us on the show today. That RTE program, what's the name of it?
It's My Uni Life. And again, it's just incredibly inspiring to see these students overcoming challenges, but particularly Sean Fogarty, who is doing something that no other student has ever done. He's actually gone back to college after such a horrendous accident, but also really embracing, his disability, but also overcoming it. That man, every time he comes on a call, he's always got a smile on, and he's always on time. And I can tell you, they're the two things. If you could do that for every online meeting, then we should all take inspiration from Sean.
That was Sean Brady from Cloud Assist. They're an Irish company who abandoned the office more than 3 years ago. They now have staff all over the world, and they can be found online at cloudassist.co. As promised, we're going to share some remote working tips and advice with you from us here at Blacknight. My colleague Jonathan Thomas is an expert at remote working. He's been doing it for years, since before he joined the company. And when we went remote back in March of last year, Jonathan started blogging on the subject. He had a lot of advice to share. He's covered things such as tools and technologies and software, and on the other hand, tips and techniques and strategies for getting the most out of working from home. He's now compiled all of these into one free PDF guide, which you can download from blacknight.blog. In fact, here's the friendly short URL you can use for that: bk.ie/WFH. That's WFH for work from home. The lockin.ie is where you can find all the episodes of this show. We're on all the major platforms, on audio and on video as well. And we'll have another episode for you in 2 weeks' time. Good day, Shin. Good day, Shif Slán.